What's up everybody? In this video I'm going to talk about how to make a gnarly glitch-hop bass with 3x OSC and some other FL Studio plugins. I use no third-party plugins in this bass, only plugins that come with FL Studio. Let me show you a preview. Now I'm going to go ahead and play that example again, only I'm going to solo the bass this time. And here's the MIDI I used. So now I'm going to go ahead and mute the effects. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the patch and how I post-process the sound. It's based on just two oscillators and it's very simple. So my first oscillator is a saw wave. So I've selected the saw wave down here. And then I've pitched it down by 24 semitones or 2 octaves. I've also transposed it down by another octave by right clicking C6. So it's at C5 normally and I've put it down to C6 just to bring it into bass range. And I've muted my second oscillator and I'm just using the first and the third, which the third is pure white noise. If you select this little thing over here, it'll give you just pure noise, and I've mixed in just a little bit to fill out the sound. So what I've done is I selected clone, and I just cloned my first bass and sent it into a different mixer channel. So my second sound, my sub bass, is just a triangle, which is like a sine wave except with more harmonics, and I've muted my second and third oscillator because I only want the sub bass to come through. So as you can see, it's a little bit more harmonically rich and it's a little bit fuller, which is what I wanted. Moving on to the effects, the first two effects I'll talk about are the Fruity Peak Controller and the Fruity Parametric EQ2. So I right clicked the first band and I've selected high pass with gentle 6 curve, and I've given it quite a high resonance. And this band is linked to the Fruity Peak Controller, but to the LFO only, not to the peak or the peak plus LFO. The bass and the volume will control the range of the modulation. And you can modulate the speed freely or set it to a synced speed. And you can also control the tension of the LFO curve. When you first open up the peak controller, you might hear no sound, so you will only have to uncheck this mute button over here and you'll start to hear sound. It can be beneficial to mess around with these bass and volume values over here because it can really give your sound some crazy vowel sounds. Next up, I've distorted the sound with the wave shaper and asymmetric distortion. And that just boosts and crunches up the sound a little bit. And then I've sent it through the vocoded, and I've cranked up the wet and the sound godizer options. And I've also unchecked this and cranked up the release to make the sound a little bit gnarlier. I haven't done all that much else in this vocoded patch. Everything is pretty much left the same, except that I've automated the bandwidth. So I've just created an automation clip, and I've made that go down to a little over halfway over the course of the loop. So that seems to make the sound a little thicker towards the end of the loop. And I've also taken down the pitch modulator to make the sound a little deeper. Next up, I've used the FL Flanger, and I've set the rate to 0 so the flanger doesn't move. And I've set the delay to 0 as well, but it sounds pretty cool if you mess around with the delay, so it's all preference. And now I've created an automation clip for the depth. So the depth is being modulated slowly in the beginning here, and it makes the flanger move a bit. And it makes it sound a little bit more interesting in my humble opinion. And here we have a bunch of EQs where I'm just taking out frequencies that I don't like and boosting frequencies that I do like, that I think are being accentuated by the Fruity Flanger. So I turned up the white noise a little bit too much in the beginning here. Alright, and now I have the reverb, which is just automating the wet amount at the end. It makes it go up and then cut out completely. I just thought it sounded cool. And then I went ahead and I linked the bass and the sub to the bass group, and I molded them together with Maximus. So I've just compressed and boosted a little bit, messed around with the stereo panning, and saturated the high end a little bit. So this makes these sounds merge together again and makes them nice and beefy. And that's pretty much it. Pretty easy. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comment section below. You have a good one.